Well, hello everyone, and welcome to another Monday night Sonar Masterclass, where today we're going to be talking to Rod Findlay. G'day, Rod. How you going, mate?
Very good, Greg. Very good.
Now,
For
now, Rod, I'm going to put your name on the screen briefly, but I think it's going to block out part of your face. So I'm not going to leave it up there for long. But mate, I believe you're part of the furniture at the Broken Bay Game Fishing Club. You've been part of the club for a long, long time. You've definitely got a reputation when it comes to fishing for tuna and marlin, mate. And we're going to talk all about marlin tonight.
Yeah. No, we've been asked to talk about marlin, but if you're going looking for anything out there, marlin or a tuna, I'd take anything either any day.
No doubt. And mate, what's the fishing been like? You've been doing a bit, or believe your boat's out of the water, but you obviously know lots of people that have boats. I'm sure that's not going to slow you down.
Yeah. No, so it has slowed me down for about 2 months. We've had Murrayfin out of the water, giving it a pretty big birthday. She turns 20 next year, so we wanted to make it look brand new. I haven't fished much in the last about month and a half, but having said that, it's not a very good time of year for marlin fishing down here. So she'll be back up and ready sort of early December, ready to go.
Yeah, if you're going to be off the water, you ought to be off the water out of season. So that's a good move.
Correct.
On your
part. Yeah.
Now, we've got a few people starting to turn up. I noticed looking at the numbers there. So Zdenko's just called in from Ulladulla. Good on you, mate, for letting us know that you're here. Folks, as you come into the live stream, please type a message into the chat box there. Let us know where you're coming from. Let us know you can hear us okay. There's nothing worse than starting a live stream and getting 10 minutes in and somebody says, hey, your audio's not working. So good to know if we're hitting the sound waves okay. So Ben, thank you for coming along, mate. Good to see you here. So Rod, this time of year, the game fishing in your part of the world, so you're based down in central New South Wales in the Sydney area, but
correct,
I mean, we're going to be talking about marlin, we're going to be talking about sonar, we're going to be giving a few tips for catching marlin that don't involve sonar as well. But
yeah.
And a lot of what we talk about is going to apply no matter where in Australia you're fishing for billfish. But your part of the world, when do the marlin really start to come on the tune, mate? They come down on the East Australian current during the warmer months?
Yeah. So normally you would be the main part of the season out of Sydney would kick off in sort of December and run right through till April. Sort of May can be fantastic still. Late May. You can catch them all year round, but it's very, very tough. You're better off targeting them sort of from December to May, and then if you really want to pick some months, February, March is the months you want to focus all your effort on.
All right. So we're doing this presentation with lots of time, guys. You're getting plenty of information well in advance. Lots of good tips about to come flowing through this presentation for those that are keen to get onto a marlin. Now, marlin fishing in your part of the world is all about the East Australian current, mate. The East Australian current sometimes flows close to the coast, sometimes flows a bit further out. I was talking to Al McGlashan last week. He was saying at the moment it's flowing down. It's taken a bit of a dog leg at I think Southwest Rocks or something like that, a bit north of Sydney and going out. And so there's still quite cool water around Sydney, but then it comes back in again around Batemans Bay. So
yeah.
If you're Sydney side, you might have to travel a bit further offshore.
Yeah. No, you and watching the RIP charts or if you look at some of those CSIRO charts, you can sort of pinpoint where the water is pushing out to sea and where it's pushing in, and if you can find where it's pushing in, that's normally the best places to target.
Yeah, you need to travel less distance to reach that warmer water. What temperatures do you like for marlin, mate? Obviously, you're keeping an eye on your sound at the surface temperatures while you're out there. What would you be looking for?
It depends on what species of marlin you're targeting. So if you're after, I've had some fantastic days fishing in just 19-degree water for striped marlin, and then I've had some amazing days fishing in 26-degree water. So a lot of the time it's more related to the direction of the current than the temperature of the water. And sometimes early season you're always looking for that first bit of warm water. You're trying to find that where the first lip of that bit of current's coming from. But later in the season, and that can also be the case, but in the middle of the season, chasing hot water is not necessarily the best thing. You can go fishing in hot water when it's got a lot of fast flowing current in it, and if you can find the inside edge of that, maybe on the cooler side of the break, it's often better.
Okay. Ooh, good tip.
Yeah. So no, less if you can fish out of the current, especially for striped marlin, black marlin, you got a lot better chance of finding a concentration of them.
Okay. And also, of course, those areas where there's upwelling. So it's looking to see where the current is striking some structure that's going to bring that cooler water up to the surface from down below, and with the nutrients and the food items, that sort of thing that cause the bait fish to aggregate. And then, of course, wherever there's bait fish, there's always going to be predators.
Yeah. And when people talk about the East Australian current, I mean, look, you very rarely do you want the current running straight downhill. If you can pick a piece of the coast to target where you've got a bit of an eddy and the water's pushing onto the coast as opposed to pushing straight down it, you get I suppose you get all the fish that are spread out outside the shelf in this much water, and with the natural effect of the current, it pushes them all in tighter, so you get a better concentration of fish. And if you think about it in a horizontal platform, the water column's getting squashed as the water gets shallower, so you get a volume of fish that's in 200 metres of water, you get it pushed into 100 metres, you're naturally going to get more life occurring. So looking for westerly running current here is good.
Yeah. All right, look, we're going to talk plenty more about this kind of stuff as we go along. But for those who have joined us, we've got quite a good crowd here tonight. So thanks everybody for coming along, and we're putting some notes in the comments there so that we know you can hear us. And we're hoping to be able to answer whatever questions you have. So don't feel shy about putting a question up there, whether it's about sonar, whether it's about marlin fishing more generally, even tuna, any kind of offshore fishing. Rod's your man. He's got all the answers. I'm just going to sit back and let him do his thing. So fire those questions through whenever you like. But Rod, what we might do just to get ourselves started, let's warm up with one of your screenshots, because you sent us a few to have a look at.
Yeah.
So this is the first one off the deck, mate. Are you happy to start with this one?
Yeah. Well, this one is we actually caught this fish on this sonar shot. There's actually two shots that look pretty similar to this, Greg. So there's one after that. If you look at the that's the second shot. So that's marking the fish the first time. So the first shot, if you pay attention to the chart plotter track, you'll see that I've marked the fish the first time. We've done a big turn to starboard, tried to come back over where he was, managed to mark him, and that was the first picture. And then we've come back around to port to sort of try and run over him, get our gear on top of him as much as we can, and managed to mark him a second time. On the third pass, which I never got a chance to take the shot at, the fish turned up in the spread and we caught it.
Excellent. And what was the fish, mate?
That was the 2017 Inner Club. That was a 150 kilo blue marlin. So it was. I suppose it gives you a bit of. These two pictures give you a bit of insight about how much time you can't just go over with the mark once and go, well, that didn't happen, and move on. You sort of got to focus your effort when you see it.
All right. So now, mate, just looking at this, you've obviously set your sounder up. There's no bottom on there. So you've set the depth.
Yeah.
So you're looking down to 80 meters. What depth of water were you in?
This fish was in about 300 odd fathoms. So unfortunately, this is the sounder shot on my left-hand screen. So on Murrayfin, I've got two 12-inch Simrad screens.
Okay.
And one sits immediately in front of me, and the other sits to the right. The reason I run my high frequency and my chart plotter on the same screen is so I can run a zoomed in chart plotter, and any fish I mark, as you can see on the screen, you can immediately turn fast and see your track, so you can accurately turn onto where you've marked a fish. On my screen on the right hand side, it would have been in low frequency, tracking the bottom, and probably would have had the chart plotter zoomed out further.
Okay.
Yeah.
Excellent. So we've got a question just come through from Cliff asking what transducer you're running for this particular setup.
In this setup, in this photo, it's an R509 LHW, which is a 1 kilowatt high frequency and 3 kilowatt low. The 1 kilowatt high is the same as a 175 puck style transducer, or it's the same as the 275. It's a 1 kilowatt high wide chirp.
All right. So let's just talk about what led up to finding this fish, because I mean, finding a fish on your sounder is one thing, but there's been a bit of work done. Let me just bring us back on the screen, mate.
Yeah.
Might be better, but there's been a bit of work done, obviously, to get to that point. You haven't just gone out aimlessly driving around the sea. So what have you done to narrow down where it is that you're going to start fishing before you've actually got to the point where you're likely to see something on your sounder that's going to tell you, okay, we need to we need to put a bit of extra in this particular spot?
Yeah, well, this particular fish is on. We caught it on Newcastle Canyon, which is if anyone's done any marlin fishing down in New South Wales, they would have heard of the car park. It's sort of southeast of the car park. We were hoping to fish the tag and release side of the tournament, and we weren't keeping up with the boat coming first. And this particular day, it was very rough. So we decided just to wander out and have a crack at the catching a blue marlin. That's how we ended up where we were there on that particular day. That particular day, and what makes that sounder shot even better is there was only about 20% of the fleet left fishing. It was that rough. So to produce a sounder shot like that on a day when it's 30 or 25 to 30 knots and 3 meters, it's a good thing.
Yeah. Mate, I'm going to bring up a question that's come up from Harley about catching marlin on stick baits. Not the most commonly done thing, but as Harley's pointed out, it is possible. So do you have any tips, mate, for doing that?
Oh, I wouldn't say I'm the right person to ask about casting stick baits at marlin, but if you are hell bent on trying to do something that's hard, like catching one on a stick bait or a fly rod, the best way to fish for them is to tease a fish and basically troll some hookless teasers around. When you see a marlin behind the teaser or you get a bite on the teaser, you slow the boat down, wind it in, and then you can present your stick bait. I was fortunate enough to be a crewman on a game boat in Cairns working for Billy Bilson. He had a Japanese client that loved casting stick baits at marlin, and that's all we did for a week was basically tow around a bunch of hookless lures, and the little Japanese guy, every time we yelled out marlin, would come wandering out of the cabin and throw a stick bait at them. So it is doable. They will eat it, but they're not. They definitely much prefer to eat a bait rather than a lure or a stick bait style lure anyway.
But like anything, mate, I guess if you're prepared to put in the time, you're prepared to put in the work, it's definitely possible. And I guess
definitely not impossible. Yeah,
the rewards are there, aren't they? It's something you'll never forget doing. So good on you, Harley, for giving that one a crack. So a question from Zdenko about the width of your sonar display.
Yeah. So yeah, that's a feature the Simrad has. So if you hit, I'm pretty sure if you hit your power screen down, or if you hit your power button on your screen when it comes up your basic settings, I think you have Wi-Fi and a couple other things. There's a button called Adjust Splits, and I slide the split over to show me to squash my chart plotter, but then to make my sounder bigger, so I get a bit more historical view on my sounder. I like to have a pretty fast scroll speed, so that's why that marlin mark is quite long. And with a faster scroll speed, a fish will disappear off the screen quite quickly if you're not paying attention. If you, when we were trolling for this particular fish, we were trolling teasers, like hookless teasers, and only one lure, and so you have to pay quite a fair bit of attention to your spread. And so I've got, the way I explain it to people, in any given minute, I'd spend 50 seconds of that 60-second period looking at my teasers, about 5 seconds looking at the sounder, and the other 5 seconds making sure I didn't run into someone, looking forward instead of looking backwards.
Most important not to have a collision at sea, mate.
Yeah,
so, got a couple more questions coming up. So one here from Matt Hansen. How are you, Matt? Good to have you here, mate. So for a starting out marlin fisher from inland, what size skirts would you recommend on the New South Wales far north coast? We're going to be trolling towards this shelf in about 600 metres.
Okay, well, 600 metres is quite deep water for most marlin. If you're out there, you're probably targeting blue marlin. If I was starting out marlin fishing, I tell most people to concentrate on trolling probably a bit smaller lures with a bit smaller hooks. Your hookup rate tends to be a bit higher. And if I was going to suggest anything, I'd suggest he looks at Peter Bakula's brands of lures and looks at his website and his advice. There's more than one ways to skin a cat, but he's got a very good, very informative website and a very informative way to teach people how how to be successful at lure trolling. And then once you get successful at it, you can then diversify a bit, I suppose, and maybe change away from his techniques. We've gone away from them and come back to them a few times in 20 years. So he definitely knows what he's talking about.
I'm going to shamelessly self-plug here as well, mate, because I've done a couple of podcast episodes with a couple of guys who have had some great advice on that stuff as well. So I did one with Tim Simpson a little while back. So this is the Australian Lure Fishing Podcast. If you just Google Australian Lure Fishing Podcast or Doc Lures and Tim Simpson, it'll bring that episode up. And Tim goes through the various styles of heads, the pushers, the jets, the various different heads that you can use and how to choose the right one for various parts of the spread and various different conditions. So that's definitely worth having a listen to. And also Matt Price talked about. Yeah, Tim knows his stuff really well. I'm going to pick your brains in a minute on something that Tim mentioned as well. But there's also a podcast episode there with Matt Price where he talks about blue marlin off Brisbane, which will probably help you out as well, Matt. So go and look those up. They're both on the website over at Doc Lures. But Rod, one of the things when I did that interview with Tim, one of the things he said to me, we got towards the end and I was just about to sign off and he said, "Oh, no, we can't go until I talk to you about hooks." He said, and how I go about sharpening my hooks. It's so important. So I'm going to pick your brains on that too, mate. So tell us about how you prepare your hooks for billfish, because it's a bit of a fine art, isn't it?
Yeah, well, you need to, you never want to put a blunt hook in the water. You spend a lot of money, a lot of time, a lot of effort getting to where you want to be. So focusing on all your effort on your terminal tackle, etc., is highly important, especially with marlin, where you might only get 2 chances in a day. A good day's marlin fishing might be 3 or 4 bites. A lot of marlin fishing days you only get 1 a chance, so you need to make sure you make the most of it.
You got
to convert the bites, yeah. So if you're fishing light enough tackle, you can use really fine diameter hooks. Is the best advice I've got for people. Using some of those SL12 style hooks or anything with a very fine, small, thin point, but you can't fish them on too heavy a tackle. So you've got to space them back and probably not use them on anything much over 15 kilo line. But if you are going to sharpen any hook, you want to make sure you're putting a lot of effort into maintaining a very sharp point and a very small barb. You don't need much barb. If you've got monofilament fishing line, you don't need nearly any barb in reality, because the line's got the stretch and the belly in the line will always hold the pressure on the hook.
Yeah, that was what I was waiting for, as Tim mentioned that he likes to take a bastard file to his hooks and the barbs down and make them a bit smaller, but also he puts a bit of a knife point on the points as well to make them penetrate a bit better and make them fairly strong. So
you can get triangulating the point, making sure anything with a triangle, if you're a builder, is strong, so you want to try and make it as strong as possible. And marlin have got a very hard mouth, so you want to make sure it can handle the impact of the marlin's bill, but then be able to drive into it.
Yep. All right. Question from Andrew Drazis. He's heard lots of different things about boat speeds. What are your recommendations? I'm assuming this is for trolling.
Well, yeah, I suppose it depends on what sort of boat he's in and what sort of style of fishing he's doing. I like, if I'm live baiting, if I happen to be towing live baits around an area and I found an area with a lot of marlin in it, I still like to live bait quite quickly and cover a bit of ground, so I could troll a slimy at 2 or 3 knots. If I'm skip baiting, I'm normally in the 5.5 knot range. I find, depending on what sort of bait you're trolling though too, we'd probably need to get a bit more detail there. In a lure scenario, 7 knots is the number I'm always looking for.
A little bit depends on the conditions as well, on the style of lures. If you've got a bunch of lures in your spread and they're busting out, and not running properly, then you need to either adjust your speed or change your lures.
Yeah, on your outrigger height and all sorts of things, the style lures. But if I was trolling a small set of pusher lures around in a trailer boat, I'd be sort of trying to do 7 knots. If you try and go much faster, you end up trying to jump onto the plane all the time, and it becomes quite uncomfortable. So if you can troll a little bit slower, that'd be good.
Yeah, so Andrew's just clarified that he's talking about fishing for small blacks on lures. So
6.5.
Yep,
6.5, 7 knots. Yeah, is perfect. And that's through water speed. That's not over ground. Lots of people make that mistake. If you're trolling into the current, then 7 knots might look like 5 on your GPS. So you've got to try and determine current speed which is a few different ways of doing that.
Do you have a preference? I know I talked to Jay Huxley recently, and he was saying his preference when he's trolling up marlin is to work across the current, and that way the current's basically carrying the fish past him, and he's covering more water effectively. Whereas if you're running with the current, you're kind of running with the fish. So if they're cruising along, not working much harder on the current,
yeah, 100% cross current. Yeah, 100%. You want to try and focus your effort crossing current, and probably on any given day you can't fish that bigger area. So you sort of where you choose to go in the morning, you want to make your choice wisely and then stay there. Is another thing I would always suggest.
Okay. So a question from Cameron. He's asking about what your go-to setup is for skip baiting.
Oh, well, I suppose if he's talking about skip baiting slimy mackerels, I wonder if he questioning the outfits, like the rods and the reels, or is he?
Yeah, do you want to just give us a little bit more information, Cameron, and we'll come back to your question, mate, once we know exactly what it is that you're asking us. We make sure we get it right, because we don't want to give you bad information. So, Stinko's asking whether you use a speed sensor.
I don't particularly have one. A paddle wheel though is very good for people that are starting out to work out through water speed versus over ground speed. It's a very easy way to determine the current. If you've got a through water speed sensor like a paddle wheel, and you're showing its speed versus your over ground speed, you can quickly determine that. Oh, okay, well, I'm doing 7 knots through the water. And I'm only going 5 knots towards my destination. There's 2 knots of current here, and I'm going into the current. Maybe I should alter my course a bit to the right and cross the current a bit better. That would be, but yeah, I don't use one myself. The best way people should set up their troll speed for their boats is to probably do it inshore, do it going down the bay, so you get your hull speed worked out. You know that at 1800 RPM, I'm going to be doing 7 knots, and then you can go from there.
Yep. Cool. So we've got a comment here from one of these disreputable characters that you warned me might come along tonight, Rod. I think it must be Riley Page.
Kylie.
He's asking where you get your haircut, mate. So you want me to block him?
No, that's all right. Leave Kylie alone. He'll settle down.
Now, we've got a couple of similar questions come through. So I'll do Justin's first and then Matt Hansen. So Justin's asking, water temps for marlin, do you look at the current lines? And then Matt Hansen's asking a similar question. He's basically been heading out till he finds a great looking current line. There's been a 2-degree change of temperature on either side of the current line. Any tips for targeting these sorts of areas with skirts?
If you're coming to an edge where you can see a lot of flotsam and jetsam in it, that I'd always pay more attention to the side, the birds, or the side that shows the life in it. Sometimes it can be the warmer side, and sometimes it can be the colder side. I've had fishing trips where I've been running to an edge like he's describing, and I'm hell bent on getting there, and I've put the lures out 3 or 4 miles short of where I thought the edge would be. And while I'm getting prepared, I've had 1 or 2 bites. I've got to the edge and thought I'm here now, and I get to the other side of it, all goes quiet, and I end up going back into the cold green water. So a lot of it depends on how much life I see on my sounder. And if I'm looking at a break, if you've got a bit of time up your sleeve before the bite period might start, so if there's a tide change and you think there's going to be a bite at around midday, then you find a temperature break, you've got to decide where you want to be for that bite time. So if you see a lot of life on the colder side, maybe birds and some stuff on the sounder, even if you're not sure what the stuff on the sounder is, you see life on the sounder. And then you go to the warmer side and it's desolate. The water might go beautiful blue colour, but all the life's gone.
There's no point.
Yeah, I'd probably suggest you go back to where the birds are, because they fish for a living. So,
yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah.
All right. So look, Cameron's got back to us. He said, yep, the base setup on skipping slimy max. What do you do when a fish comes up, rigger tension and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, so we do a lot of skipping slimy mackerels around for striped marlin and blue marlin down here. So the outrigger tension that we use a Blacks clip predominantly, which is a little outrigger clip. If he goes and Googles Blacks clip, it'll come up. The tension it requires is once he's set his troll speed and he's got the weight of the bait there, once he's put a rubber band on the line or a bit of rigging floss, however which way he wants to hold into the outrigger, he's got to just basically give it a few practice releases. You want enough tension there to hold the bait in the clip, but you want maybe 500 grams of additional pressure to pull it out. Too little and it comes out all day, it'll be annoying if it keeps nuisance tripping. If it does nuisance trip a few times, just click it up a little bit. But that could obviously change in the weather as well. If it's calm in the morning, you can back your clips off and fish them a bit lighter, and then creep them up as the day gets a bit, if it gets a bit rougher later in the day. It's something you should always be playing with, but you should always have just enough to hold it there. And a free spool time, etc. Very much depends on the day, but average is 5 seconds, I would say.
Okay, cool.
5 second free spool, let it come out. Pull the boat, slow the boat down a little bit, but you don't bring it to a complete stop. Just slow it down a little bit and then count to 5 and have a go.
Put it into gear, away you go.
Yeah.
Hopefully everything comes up tight. All right. So question from Luke, and then we might just zap back to some more screenshots. So Luke's question is, what's your plan when you're raising blues as fast as possible once they go deep, with the current or against the current?
Well, the best plan for a blue marlin is to not let it go deep. Is to cut him off at the pass and not let him get there. That requires fairly fast response when you first hook them. But if he does go deep on you, you 100% got to pull them down current, and you've got to get as much drag on there as you're comfortable with as quickly as you can. So having a lot of confidence in your fishing line you're using and the tackle you got set up, and having the angler. If you don't have very good anglers, which when you got someone like Riley Page on there and you don't have a good angler, you might put markers on the reel so you know exactly how much drag you're putting on there. For instance, if you're using 24 kilo fishing line, you definitely want to have the ability to go to 12 kilos of drag when you're setting the drag. And if a fish is going deep on me, and it's slowing down and doing that crash dive, I'm going to get as much drag on it as I can and get down current, because the longer you wait, the further away he gets. When he gets further away, the stretch in the line, the act of the current, everything becomes a lot harder. So,
well, and your drag settings all change as well once you start to lose a bit of line off that reel. And
and blue marlin, I got done by blue marlin this year in April pretty spectacularly, so bad that I didn't want to show anyone the GoPro footage. But but then you have some wins, like we had that photo earlier where you can catch one in about 7 or 8 minutes. But if he is going deep on you, my suggestion is close the gap as quickly as you can at the start of the fight. Don't clear all your lures. If he's taking off, turn around, get after it. Stay as close to the fish as possible. And if it does do the big crash dive, try and move down current. If you 100% know the current's going one way, just push the drag up and just idle off down current a little bit and pray that he stops.
Excellent. So Riley's come back, mate. I'll let you read that for yourself. So let's bring up another one of your screenshots. This one's not a screenshot, mate. This is a brag shot. So
okay, yeah.
Tell us about this fish.
That's a yellowfin tuna we caught during the COVID lockdown only about 2 months ago. So the yellowfin tuna fishing off Sydney this last year has been incredible. Like we had a day in March where we caught sort of 9 all up around that size in one day. It was a spectacular day's fishing. And I think there's a screenshot I sent you of that day. But those fish were in quite warm water, and that fish was caught sort of in 23-degree water out blue marlin fishing in April off Sydney.
So is that the correct screenshot, mate?
No. That's the transducer setup in the Mariwini.
Let me just wander through them.
Yeah. Not that one. Not that one. That's my old sounder.
Have I maybe not put it
in there? Maybe not got loaded in there. That's all right. We can find it later.
All right. Let's have another screenshot though.
Yeah.
if I can work the mouse. All right, tell us what's going on here, mate.
Well, that's a striped marlin that we've run over on the car park. I've snapped that on my phone just before he's bitten. But what I wanted to display in that shot is you can see if you look at the arch, the way it's displaying, you can see the fish is actually he's coming up towards the boat. You can see that it's got an upward trajectory in the arch. So if you look at a couple of my other sounder shots, you'll see that there's times when the fish don't do that. And it might not be bite time. With that fish, you knew the second I saw that, I knew he was coming, and it gave me a good 5-6 seconds time to warn the crew that we're about to see one. So get ready. Right. Put your beer down. That's probably what I'd say.
We're definitely going to have to block this Riley Page character. We've started something now. All right, let's move on to another screenshot. So this looks pretty good, mate. I'd be pretty happy if I saw that while I was out in the boat.
Yeah, that was last January. Riley's comments gone over the Latin Long for a second, so that was pretty handy. But that's just inside Nora Canyon. This is fishing in my trailer boat last January. These were the first one of those 3 fish. I don't know which one it was. We caught it was the first male of the season for Broken Bay Game Fishing Club in January. It was actually the first day I fished my 228 Grady White. So it sort of was a good proving day to prove my setup was working. But this is a bait school in 90 odd fathoms inside Nora Canyon. We'd found the bait school. If you look up the very top of the shot where you can see behind Murrayweenie Chirp, you can see the history of the bait school there. We'd sort of been hunting around on it, trolling around at sort of 5-6 knots, skipping slimy mackerel, and then we got to the outside edge of the current and saw these 3. So this is 3 striped marlin, and we ended up catching 4 that afternoon. So it was a good day.
Excellent.
So that's the transducer setup in my 228 Grady White. That's a B275 LHW, and we've gone to the trouble of putting it in a fairing block and mounting it sort of midships in the boat like many big boat setups would be, and that's to get really good performance on the trawl or travelling. Depth sounder performance is all about installation. So if you put a lot of effort into your installation, you get the results.
Paul's saying, "I'll pay you whatever you want if you can make my screen look like
that." Well, yeah, it takes some time. I know when I first became involved with Simrad, I had some gear to test, and I got an email, and they said, "Oh, you haven't sent us anything." And I said, "Well, I've been fishing 5 times, I haven't caught anything, and I haven't seen anything on the sounder, so I can't tell you that it works or it doesn't. We just had one of those periods off Sydney where it was incredibly quiet." So it's whenever you see that other screenshot pop up on your sounder, you normally know you're going in for a good day or a good morning or a good afternoon, one of the two.
Yeah, indeed. Let me just bring up Paul's next comment. So running an Evo, I'll let you figure that out. I'm going to go back to that screen, mate. So
yeah.
So Paul, maybe if you could tell us if you are having trouble getting the quality of image out of your Evo.
I know what all those numbers mean. So that image is taken. His TM276. I think it should be a 275. That's his transducer model, which would be identical to that one. The S5100. That's the same sonar module that I'm running on that unit. So that's nearly an identical unit to that Evo 3. The S2009 is just another screen. It's a Simrad sonar screen, but it puts a 9-inch screen vertically, which is very good screen to use because it gives you a lot of depth perception in its shot. If he's not getting great performance, the only difference between my setup and his right there is he's got a transom mount transducer. So if he's not getting great sounder readings on the troll, he probably needs to look at his transducer placement or installation. And but we'd need to see some shots of that operating to give him some advice. The other thing could be he could have electrical interference, all sorts of things if he's not getting it, or he could just not be trolling in the right spots. As I said, you got to. It's not every day you run over a place like that where you go, hello, there's the marlin. It's pretty easy to see.
That's the stuff dreams are made of. Paul, the other thing we had Matt Hooper on the live streams a little while back doing a masterclass for us, and he made mention of the fact that sometimes with your transducer, even lowering it down by a centimeter or so can make a big difference. So just play around with the transducer location and angle and that kind of thing a little bit, and see if you can get a better image out of it. If not, as Rod said, if it's not electrical interference, then perhaps you need to take it to a dealer and try and get some advice, or get someone out on the boat who's does that kind of thing, and see if there's something that can be done to improve it. But you've got all the right gear, is what we say.
Yeah, you got the right gear there. You probably it's very hard to convey sounder shots for them to send us for us to sort of fault find a bit. Maybe that's not what we're here for tonight. But if he has one, the basic settings there on my screen, you can see where my gain's at, where my color gain's at. Noise interference is low. Scroll speed's 2 to 1. There's very little in that's not hard to replicate.
So we've got another question come up here from Matt Weber. He's got an RH509 LHW 3 kilowatt transducer. He gets a lot of vertical lines as the water gets deeper. Any idea on how to get rid of them?
That's the same setup. So that's the same setup we're running on Murrayfin, the R509. I'd have to see the picture to try and pick whether it's electrical interference or whether it's air in the water column, like noise you're generating through air in the water column. It's hard to fault find, a package without seeing how it's running with installation. I know my Grady White setup, when I first commissioned it, I had my autopilot computer on my S5100, 150 mil apart. I'm an electrician by trade, so I knew about how far the RF interference could potentially throw. And it had noise on the sounder screen, and I ended up moving it another 25 mil because that's the only room I had left. Otherwise, I had to start moving components out from under seats, and the extra 25 mil made all the difference. So sometimes you want to try and get your sounder cables and everything on the clearest possible path, away from any sort of noise, away from batteries, away from any sort of other power cables, etc. Ideally, if you've got a boat, run it on a totally separate path on its own.
All right, so question from Guy about why you run high chirp in manual.
I run high chirp in manual. I run high or low in manual, and that's the Simrad Auto does an amazing job. It marks fish and bait very well, but the one thing that auto settings do is they always want to maintain the same sort of picture quality. You probably notice a lot of my pictures look a bit noisier than they should. They're not probably something that you should look at. You'd want to see in a Simrad brochure. But I've always got my gain up to the highest possible point where I'm getting noise and surface clutter, and that's to try and tell what the water quality is doing. So if you've got a really heavy thermocline in the water, or if any of those sort of things come and go during the course of the day, if you're in auto, that might get faded out by the machine backing the gain off automatically in the background without you realizing. So I like to have the gain as high as I possibly can, and when I'm trolling slower, I'm cranking my gain up until it gets a bit of clutter, and when I'm trolling faster, I'm backing it off to maintain the same sort of picture. Occasionally you do get scenarios where it changes quite dramatically in a day.
Joe's asking about the S5100, mate. Does it make much of a difference?
For me, it does. That first shot we started off with, that was the prototype S5100 they made, the first one they made that come to Australia. We got the test. When I went from running it straight out of the back of the Evo 3 to running that, I noticed that I could run a lot higher gain settings in a lot rougher weather, so it was obviously more powerful. I'm not a Simrad propeller head in the background doing all of the software development or that, but it was definitely working better for me. and it gave me a lot of confidence to keep fishing with it. So if I had the ability to buy an S50-100 and I didn't have one, I'd probably try and get one in the system. But straight out of the back of an Evo 3 should still work very well out to sort of 200 meters of water. So majority of marlin fishing scenarios, you don't 100% need it, but it is better.
All right. One of those things we just have to have.
Yeah.
We may not necessarily need it. All right. What do we got here, mate? Let me just bring it up, make it a bit bigger.
Oh, that was that Riley Page Buffhead was on the boat the day I took this photo. This is actually this is sort of probably displaying how good the new modern sounders are. So this is that little red shape in that bellow. There's another sort of small, medium blue marlin. I think it was 120, 130 kilos. And the bait around either side of him is a bunch of frigate mackerels. They were all showering on the surface that day. We were trolling through them, and I saw that and said, "Oh, I'm pretty sure there's no dolphins here. I reckon we've just seen it. You know, I reckon I've just run out of a marlin." And then the next thing you know, it ate the lure. So I suppose it was just showing that how accurate and how sensitive some of this stuff is these days. A lot of the lesser gear or a lot of the older gear wouldn't have that detail. It'd just look like bait, and you would have totally missed it. So it was probably just sort of showing that side of it.
We've certainly come a long way with our marine electronics.
Yeah.
This looks nice too, mate.
Yeah. Well, that's a striped marlin on the left, and if I'd had a video and panned around, we're fighting the fish at the time. So you can see there's two marlin in that picture, and they've got a spool or a spar of bait pushed up in between them. They've got that stuff on the bottom's a mixture of slimy mackerels and cow and young, and the fish on the left-hand side of that screen, he's raising up to eat one of our skipping slimy mackerels. So that's another indication of where we were skip baiting around that day, and you can see the fish coming before you get the bite, which is pretty cool.
Absolutely is.
It's good. It's always good to have a bit of warning. You can say to the guys, "Hey, look at this. We'll just mark one, and he's coming for us," and allows everyone to turn their attention onto the spread and not be looking around. It makes the whole day a bit more exciting. It definitely adds something to your fishing now. It's almost like a computer game if you in some ways of thinking about it.
But I think it's also critical, if you're doing photography or videography and you want to catch that moment of the bite, you want to catch that fish jumping, you can see it all unfolding on the screen before that fin appears behind the bait, and you can just got that few seconds to get a camera out and be focused in the right place.
Yeah, and Simrad's posted videos of some of my other mates with actually doing this as a video Sundal Benson took, where he's narrating to camera. He said, "I've just marked one," and he's watching the fish come up through the water column, and it got all the way up he marked it all the way from 50 fathoms, which is down where that second fish is on the right-hand side of the screen, all the way up to his boat. So he was calling it the whole way up, and then when it disappeared off the screen, they turned around and it ate the bait. So the modern stuff, if you get it tuned up correctly and you're in the right area at the right time, it makes it pretty amazing.
Yep. All right, on to the next. Whoop, gone too far. On to the next one, mate.
Well, this is a pretty similar scenario to the last one, except we're not catching fish out of this here. But I suppose this is the same sort of screen setup that I run on Murrayfin, where the screen in front of me's got the chart plotter and the sounder, so I don't have to look at the screen on the right too often. I'm just looking directly in front of me and then back to my gear. But this is showing, if you look up in the top of the chart plotter, you can see how I focused all my effort, about a mile north of where I am there. And I've just wandered away that little bit on another set of zigzags, and I've seen a bit of bait, done a couple of loops, and in what would be my second loop over the next bit of bait I've seen a couple of marlin on it. So I suppose it's sort of suggesting that, if you see a bait school, make sure you have a good look at it. Don't think that if you run over it once and you don't mark fish on it, that there's none there. You might have to look around a bit, if that makes sense. And if
Well,
you do find bait and
Marlin,
you don't mark marlin, then it pays to look around on a bait school more than just sit on it. At least a lot of people these days think that once they've found a bait school, they've found a marlin, where it's not always the case.
no. And I was going to say, marlin, like all offshore pelagic fish, tend to be pretty fast moving, and you can have a few different bait balls within a fairly small area. They can be moving between them quite easily. You just have to happen to be Johnny on the spot. And perhaps that's a good opportunity, mate, for us to have a talk about that bottom calculator you showed me. And maybe I can bring that up on the screen, because it's probably a relevant extension of the conversation. Let me see if I can find it and bring it up. I might actually have to exit this screen, so just bear with me a moment, and I'll share screens again. All right. So as you're explaining to me, this is a
this is AirMar's bottom coverage calculator. So lots of people, I suppose, don't have a general understanding of how much area their transducer is covering when they're trolling around. So if you can see, it's pretty small font there, but I think at about 150 meters, when it's in meters, you can click it into meters. You're in feet there. Eyes aren't that good.
Let me just switch it to meters. How's
Yeah,
that?
yeah. So you can see how much bottom coverage you're getting. So you can, while you're trolling around, I suppose it allows you to quickly gauge how big a zigzag you can do for how much bottom you're covering. So you can sort of start to spread your search area out when you don't have bait on your sounder at the time you're fishing. If you're fishing an area where there's a bit of marlin and bait action, that there's no point running up and down the same track. You can start to head a little bit north or a little bit south, and if you do mark something mid-water, it's got to be within 40 meters either side of you. Now these transducer angles are so wide, you've got a fair bit of coverage. It's you're getting double the vision you would have out of a sounder that you had. If your sounder's 7 or 8 years old before the wide beams come out, a boat with a wide beam transducer's got about twice as good a view. So it's like driving around with blinkers on if you've got the old style transducers.
Yeah, yeah. All right, so question from Guy about, I'm just going to take that off the screen again for a moment. A question from Guy about trolling speed for skipping baits. I think we might have covered it, but maybe we'll go over it again for those that missed it. So
yeah, like it depends on the bait you're trolling. But majority of the time, most people are trolling skipping baits at sort of 4.5 to 6 knots, with 5 knots being the average. I would tend to aim for 5.5, depending on the boat I'm in and what sort of noises it's making and stuff too. Lots of big game boats these days, if there is people on this that are in them, they have trouble going slow enough. If a big game boat does 30 knots flat out, a lot of the time they idle at 6.5, 7. So you might have to troll around on one motor even. Or in a trailer boat, you might be, doing 800-900 revs. And I suppose sometimes there's these little sweet spots in boats where there's no vibration and everything falls in sync and there's not a lot of noise. Then that's normally where I aim. But 5.5 knots. But set your speed somewhere in a bay or somewhere where there's not a lot of tidal effect, so you know what sort of RPM you need to do to achieve the through water speed you want. And then when you're out at sea, you can pretty quickly tell whether you're trolling into the current, against the current, with the current, just by watching your GPS speed over the ground. Does that make sense?
Makes sense to me, but
I hope so.
If it doesn't make sense to you, get back to us. We're happy to flesh it out a little bit further. So let's, why is it doing that? Let me bring this up. So another screenshot here, mate. Talk to us about a particular day.
That was the last day of the Broken Bay comp in 2018. I think that was the year we won that tournament. There wasn't that many fish around, but I suppose it shows you how hard I've been working that area. When you look at my chart plotter, you can see that I've been going round and around looking, and then we finally find the big spar of bait that big vertical spar of bait on the left of screen is normally a great indicator that the marlin are on it, even if you don't mark one. And luckily in this particular picture, you've got the perfect indicator of the striped marlin sitting off the side of it. And as you can see in that picture, related to my other ones, we didn't get a bite off that fish. So you can imagine how frustrating that is coming into the final minutes of a fishing tournament. And you need one to win, and you know one's right there, but you can't get it to bite. So sometimes having the best gear is a curse. It just means you know that they're snubbing you.
You know that you're not good enough. That was
Yeah.
actually the question I was going to ask you, mate. I mean, putting a tournament aside, I mean, I know a lot of you guys will be interested in tournament fishing, but if you're just out there for a fish, mate, how long would you spend when you've got a show of bait like that? You can see there's a fish around. How long would you spend on that bait ball before you said, okay, look, this fish is just not feeding, or it's not interested in what we're putting in front of it at least, and then, you know, move on, look for the next fish?
Oh, I'm a pretty stubborn person. If anyone knows me, I would stay there all day. I wouldn't go looking. There's that saying, "Don't leave fish to find fish." So, I've had more instances in my life where I've seen fish on the sounder and had to leave. Be it I've got to go to a different port that evening, or you're fishing to a different area, or there's a scenario where you can't stay there, and then you find in the afternoon the place went bonkers and you missed out. So. A lot of the time, if you see once your gear's working good, you persistence is the hard part. Having the persistence to stay there. We caught a fish after marking that one, not far from there, but I definitely don't think it was that one because I marked him 3 or 4 times. But I suppose persistence. Once you see them on the screen, it's like like seeing a free. You got to start seeing the fish you see on the screen like a free swimming fish you might see if you saw one tail past your boat. You just hang on it or hang there. If you know the bait's there, by all means, if the bait's moving with the current, keep moving, keep with it. But if you're marking bait and fish, you just got to wait for someone to ring the dinner bell, or a dumber one to turn up than the other ones.
You know, there's something there to attract them and hold them anyway, I guess. So.
Yeah, if you're seeing them on the screen, there's 3 parts to the whole game plan. One's finding them, and you've done that. So your next thing, getting one to bite.
Yep. All right, mate. So, guys, got another question about how to bridle baits. Is that something we can work through without the assistance of visual aids, or is?
That's pretty hard. I mean, it's a hard thing to explain, but I suppose if you've got a rigging needle and a bridle, I like to make my bridles about. If I'm bridling a slimy mackerel that's 300 or 400 mil long, I like to make my bridle about maybe 70 mil off the hook, 70 mil long. I have a closed eye needle. I like using a closed eye needle because when you pass it through the bait, you're aiming for I like to use the front of the eye socket as the place where you push the needle through, as opposed to the clear section of nose. Some people like to do the nose, but I've had problems where fish have pulled the bait off the bridle. So a closed eye needle is nice and smooth. You just push the bridle through it enough that you can hold it outside the needle, push it through as quickly as you can, and put it over the hook. Twist it up on itself, go through one way. Twist it back the other way, go through once the other way. I don't like the hook being too tight on the bait either.
Probably some pretty good resources, I'd say, on YouTube that might be able to help you.
Yeah. You're speaking of Ali, he's got a video on there of bridling baits. I remember doing it.
Al McGlashan, yep. Go and have a look at that. Yep. All right. What have we got here, mate?
Well, this is our original Simrad setup. This is it's the photo's been a bit squashed in the middle, but
Let's see if I can fix
that. You can count the number of marlin in that shot. This is probably just. I always think it's relevant. You get a lot of people that say I've got old gear and I can't. It doesn't work as good as the new gear. Well, this screenshot's with a sounder that's best part of 20 years old now. It's the original Simrad CX44 that we had in Murrayfin. And that's a big pile of striped marlin. One thing you see in that shot is that big red line running through 50 fathoms there. That's a thermocline. So if you look up at the top, you'll see the temperatures 25.9 degrees, which is pretty hot for striped marlin, and the majority of the marlin in that picture are below the thermocline. They're down 100 meters or 50 fathoms. But I suppose the main reason I like showing that to shot to people is lots of people like to talk about it and say, I don't get access to the best gear. And I suppose throw the towel in, think they don't need to try, where you can, if you're out there long enough and you put enough time and effort into how you use it, read the manual, give it a few tweaks either way, you can run over fish. And there would have been a lot of, if I had a wide angle transducer like we did that coverage chart earlier, I'd hate to think of the number of striped marlin under my boat at that time. That would have been a pack of 20 or 30 fish. I've only marked, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 in that one shot. And that's with a 10-degree transducer. So if it was 25, I reckon there would have been 20 on the screen. and that's another thing, I suppose, if people go back and watch this and go through those sounder shots, I think every shot will have a different water temperature on it, from 21.5 to 23 to 25.9. So the only common thing in those sounder shots is the marlin are where the food is. So concentrate on finding the food.
Good tip. Stenko is asking about drag settings, mate, when you're trolling slimies.
Well, your reels predominantly, if you're trolling slimies and you're bait fishing, so your reels got to be in what I'd call a free running drag. It's not free spool, but the drag's high enough that if the bait comes out of the rigger or if a fish eats the bait directly off the rod tip, line can pull off the spool. If you go over the reel and pull line off the spool to simulate a bite, the reel should let line roll off it freely enough that it's not going to backlash if it's an overhead, but will not have that much drag that it's going to pull the bait out of the fish's mouth. So it's sort of in some brands of reels, it's quite a very small section of the lever that you can leave it in. We're using some of the new smaller Talica game fishing reels that have got a really nice drag cam, and that free running drag area is quite big. So you've got lots of play there to make a beautiful free running drag, to the point where people don't need to put the reel into free spool. They're just good out of the box, if that makes sense. So drag settings, free running drag, and simulate it. Like one of the other guys had asked about what drag setting to have on your clips. You got to simulate it. Pretend to be the fish, pull it out, see what if it felt hard, back it off. If it felt just a little bit of pressure and it come out, well, that's nice. If you've got your free running drag set, if you want to know if it's right, rip the spool. See if it backlashes. You'd rather backlash it then than backlash it when your marlin you've been waiting all day for turns up.
All right. Now we are out of screenshots, mate. We've been through the entire slide deck, so we are pretty much done with that. I've just put up a link for those that are interested in that bottom coverage calculator that we had up on the screen a minute ago. I've just put a link up to that in the chat. So go nuts checking out what the areas you get coverage of with your sounder with the wide beam these days. It's all there, and you can have a play around with that. So Rod, mate, I guess we're going to start to bring this to a close. We'll give it a couple more minutes just in case anyone's got any questions. But yeah, really want to thank you for your time this evening and for sharing some great tips. And I want to thank our audience as well for coming along and asking some great questions, with the exception of one heckler, of course, that we had to keep under control. But other than that, I think we did pretty well. So thanks to you guys. And thanks also, of course, to Navico and to Simrad for putting these masterclasses on. It's always a pleasure to bring them to an audience and to be able to get some great fishing advice and great sonar advice as well from some top people. So, mate, it looks like we don't have any more questions coming through. So on that note, I'm going to bid you good evening and bid our audience good evening as well. We'll do all this again in another 2 weeks, guys. I'm not sure yet who we've got on board for that next one, but rest assured that there will be another one in 2 weeks' time. So Monday night in 2 weeks, 8 o'clock daylight savings time, 7 o'clock if you're a Queenslander like me, and we'll see you then, and have a good time between now and then. Hope you get onto a few fish. So good evening to everyone.
All right, thanks, Greg.